So today I want to talk about B12, which is possibly the most controversial spoken about nutrient, especially when you're talking about vegan and vegetarian diets. B12, it's all about B12. How do you get your B12, 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 B12? So I thought it was about time I talk a little bit about it. So first of all, I just want to mention, that in nature, animals, they eat what is naturally appealing to them. They don't really think about nutrients and getting enough of this nutrient and enough of that nutrient. They just eat what appeals to their natural senses. So looking at the B12 issue, or any nutrient for that matter, we shouldn't have to figure out a way to get enough of it. It should just happen naturally when we're in our natural environment and having available all natural foods and then picking the ones that are most appealing to us. So it shouldn't be necessary to think too much about it. But we humans, we are not living in our natural environment anymore. We've created lots of different strange kind of environments in our lives. And so we have to think a little bit and be like, how would it be if we were in nature? So I'll get back to that. First, I also want to mention that the science is not conclusive when it comes to B12. There's still a lot of confusion. We're still learning about it, essentially. So anyone talking about B12, including the scientists and including myself today, is just speculating. So the biggest misconception that surrounds B12 is that it is only found in animal foods, that it is produced by animals in animal foods, and we should eat meat to get B12. Well, the thing is, B12 is not produced by animals. B12 is produced by bacteria. Bacteria produces B12. These bacteria, of course, live everywhere, like bacteria do. They live especially, in the soil. They're inside our intestinal system. They're in the spring water. I've even heard people say that these bacteria live in the air around us. And that makes sense. There are bacteria everywhere, and some of them produce B12. So, of course, the animals, like the cow and the sheep, etc., they're getting their B12 from the grass. They're getting their B12 from being contaminated with these bacteria that live in the soil and on the grass, etc. That's how they get their B12. They also produce it inside their intestinal system, and some of them might be able to uptake that B12. And I've also heard that animals that are not, grass-fed, that are eating inside and get fed soy and all that crap, they are getting B12 supplements. Whereas when they're outside in nature, they get their B12 naturally. And they're vegans. They are vegans, right? A cow, it's a vegan. A bull, a sheep, they're all vegans. Horses, they get their B12 from being in a natural environment. And as soon as they're taken out of that natural environment, they need B12 supplementation. So it is true, though, that there is B12 in meat and animal products. So if you're eating that food, if you're eating meat, you will get some B12. That doesn't mean that that's all it takes, because there are lots of meat-eating people with the B12 deficiency. It isn't only the vegans that have low B12. Lots of meat eaters have as well, because there are more factors than just intake of B12. There's also absorption, and there's also something called intrinsic factor, which is essentially how you're able to take the B12 from the food you're eating and actually uptake it. But as I said, there is B12 in meat. But let's talk about vitamin D quickly. Vitamin D, we're designed to create vitamin D by exposure to sunlight. That's our natural source of vitamin D. But there is vitamin D in fish, for example. People that eat fish, they do get vitamin D from eating fish. Does that mean we should eat fish? No, it doesn't at all. We're not supposed to eat fish. Do you want to grab a fish and just eat it like a bear does, raw? Of course not. We're not designed to eat meat. It's not appealing to us to grab a fish and eat it. It's not our natural source of vitamin D. We're supposed to get it from the sun. And just the same thing is going on here with B12. Just because there's B12 in meat doesn't mean that we should eat meat to get our B12. We should get our B12 from a natural source. And that brings me to the main point of this video, which is B12 is actually not something that we're supposed to get from our diet. Just like vitamin D is not supposed to come from our diet. Vitamin B12 is supposed to come to us through contamination with our environment. If we were living in a natural environment, we would be in contact with the soil all the time. We would have soil on our fingers, then we would eat, we would get some of that bacteria and B12 in our mouth that way. And also we produce it in our intestinal system, which would mean when we take a shit, there's a chance that we would get a little bit of contamination, bacterial contamination on our fingers. That, and then we would eat later and we would get B12. You know, that this is how animals in nature, they live like this. They're perpetually in touch with nature, and there's this cycle of nutrients and bacteria and everything that goes through you again and again. But of course, we moved away from that kind of living. We are now living in a very sterile environment, often inside houses. We're washing our hands all the time. The soils that produce our food are often dead, you know, because there's so much poison used in producing the food. Even when it's organic, that doesn't mean that the soil is healthy and full of microbial activity. So maybe there's no B12 being produced in that dead soil, so there will be no B12 contamination on the food picked, and then the food is sprayed with pesticides possibly. And then of course, what do? We wash the food when we come home, and you know, it's just, we're living so unnatural lives that chances of getting enough B12 in the natural way is quite low. And you know, we do produce B12 in our intestinal system. The bacteria in our intestinal system produce B12, but they are quite low down in the small intestines, almost at the end before the colon. That's where we produce B12, and this is too low down apparently for us to uptake any of that B12 ourselves. But I have heard, you know, there's a possibility that some people are able to uptake it. And also we have to realize that a healthy intestinal flora is not something most people have. People take antibiotics. If they eat meat and animal products, there's often antibiotics in there because antibiotics are given to the animals because they're so sick. You know, they're held in captivity and they're fed crappy food and they don't get movement and sunshine. They're unhealthy, so they get sick, and then they give them shots of antibiotics, and the people eating that meat will also get antibiotics in their body. And then of course we eat garlic and onion and things that actually kill bacteria in our intestinal flora. So if we were to cultivate health and really also then cultivate a healthy intestinal flora, it is possible that we would start uptaking B12 from our own bacteria. That would be cool. But again, it's just speculations because no one really knows quite yet. We're still learning about it. We also have to consider that normal levels of B12 might be higher than optimal. You know, if people are eating lots of meat, like people are, they would naturally have more B12 in their bloodstream than if they didn't eat meat. Maybe unnaturally so. Just like eating a lot of meat might give you too much iron. It's actually a problem for some people. They have too much iron. You know, we're all scared of not enough iron, not enough iron. But too much iron is also bad. So in the same way, maybe we can have too much vitamin B12. But of course, vitamin B12 is flushed out, it's water soluble. So toxicity is not really an issue with B12. But nevertheless, levels might be artificially high. And also people eat a lot of fortified foods, typically. Oftentimes there's B12 added to soy milk and to grain products and all that stuff. So people might have artificially high levels and the standards might be too high. Basically, the physiological norms are off. The general population is not very healthy. It's generally a little bit on the sick side, maybe. And that way, how can we really trust the numbers that we're given as optimal? So when people go vegan or they go healthy, they try to embrace a healthy lifestyle, sometimes you see the levels drop. Quite often the levels always drop, and everyone goes like, oh my god, you have a B12 deficiency. But maybe they're supposed to drop, you know? Maybe we're not supposed to have so high levels of B12. Or maybe we are. Maybe we should have high levels of B12, but it's because of our unnatural lifestyle rather than the foods we're eating or not eating. So if it's true that we need higher levels of B12, it's possible that the meat eaters have a slight advantage in that sense, you know, because they're getting it from their meat, but they're getting all that other crap too, and they're lacking all the nutrients that they should be getting from plant foods. So overall, it's a bad deal. Just like with the fish, you know, if you're living in somewhere where there's no sunshine year round and you're eating fish, well, at least you're getting vitamin D. That's good, but you're getting all other types of crap too, and it would be much better if you just moved to somewhere where you would get enough sunshine and eat fruit and healthy food and avoid eating fish. Some people might also be able to absorb B12 better than others. So there's genetics that play a role, there's lifestyle and current diet, etc. So what's my strategy? Well, my B12 levels are low according to the standards, but I don't have any overt symptoms, nothing like what they say should be happening when I have such low B12. I should be having all these neurological symptoms. I'm not experiencing any of those. So should I supplement? Well, that's a personal question. Personally, I choose to supplement at this moment. I'm supplementing with this sublingual B12. I've done it once before as well, because I like experimenting. I like to learn. So what I do is I take blood tests pretty much every 6 months, at least once a year, and I observe my test results over time. So I've seen my levels slowly drop. I tried supplementing. I didn't feel any different. I saw my levels rise. I pretty much felt the same, I think. My levels dropped down again. Now they're low. And now I'm going to try supplementing for a longer time. I'm thinking maybe 1 year. Try supplementing for 1 year. See if I can get my level up to, wherever they say is a high level. And then I'll see, am I feeling radically different there? Is it, if I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then I'll stop and then I'll see them drop again, and then I'll see, am I now feeling just as good or worse? Essentially, it's a long experiment, maybe 10 years or so, where I have to try and see if I can see any connection with my B12 level and my overall feel. And even then, it's very inconclusive, it's very subjective and very difficult to really pinpoint if it's that or not. But either way, chances are it's not dangerous to supplement with B12 because it's water soluble, so toxicity is very rare. So it's really a personal choice. If you have symptoms though, if you have B12 deficiency symptoms, by all means try supplementation. Try methylcobalamin, which is the one I recommend. This one is nice, sublingual, you just dissolve it under your tongue, or worst case you could even try shots, but I kind of feel like this is just more natural. I don't feel like doing shots, but try supplementing if you have symptoms, and if your symptoms go away, well, it sounds like you needed it, right? And then you can keep supplementing, or see if your symptoms come back if you stop some supplementation. But the overall message, the most important thing is that don't focus too much on one single nutrient like that, and don't be scared and be like, oh my God, I have B12. No, do your blood tests, see how you feel. If you want to experiment with supplementation, do that. But the main thing with B12 is really the environment we're living in, and unless we're living in a perfectly natural environment with close to the earth and touching the soil all the time and breathing the fresh air and fresh water, chances are that our health will not be optimal. And we might have to do certain things like supplementing B12 to reach optimal health. It's possible. Remember, of course, that if you're stressing a lot, you can lose a lot of B12. So really take care of your overall health. Rest, sleep, diet, sunshine, fresh air, exercise. There are so many factors in health. Go to our website at sweetnaturalliving.com to read about all the factors of health there. Some of them anyway. And yeah, just remember to focus on the whole picture, not just one single nutrient. B12 is a complex issue, but in reality I think it's pretty simple. It's just we're not living in nature with all these bacteria and everything like that. We're living different lives now, and that might impact our B12 situation. So thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of this video. If you have any questions or comments or criticisms or anything, you can post it down below. You could always send us an email at contact@sweetnaturalliving.com. If you're interested in health coaching, you can go to our website to read more about that. And of course, stay tuned to all our YouTube videos coming up. We got lots of exciting content. And yeah, I hope you have a good day. See you around.